Technology Council, and I am joined today by my co-host of Tech Vibe Radio, Jonathan Kirsting, who's also Vice President of Visibility for the Tech Council as well. Today, we have a special double header. We have Dan Gilman, who serves as Chief of Staff to Bill Peduto. He will be joining us first, to be then followed immediately by Dawn Smith and Colleen Pormensky from RIDC, who will answer technical questions about the state's new $100,000 small business loan. So a few things about today's call. First, it would not have been possible without the strong support of our good friends at Huntington Bank. They've stepped up to sponsor the series. If you don't know about Huntington, they're actually the largest SBA lender here in southwestern Pennsylvania. And there are some great things about to happen in Congress relative to SBA loans, and organizations such as Huntington are going to be on the front lines helping to process applications. I also want to thank the team at AT&T for sponsoring our ongoing public policy series. They have been a long-standing partner of the councils, and I particularly want to commend their team for the company's recent $10 million donation to help give parents, students, and teachers the tools they need for what is now a requirement of at-home learning. So a little bit about the technology that we're using in our format for today's call. Most of you will notice that we have muted your microphones. I would ask that you keep your microphones on mute throughout the call. Some of us have a lot of background noise going on around us. We want to ensure that everyone can hear our guests very clearly. So with that said, we want this call to be interactive. Please take note of the chat box at the bottom of your desktop screens. If you have questions for our guest, please type the question in that box along with your name and company. We will try to answer as many of these questions as possible. So with no further delay, I'd like to welcome today's guest. Some of you may know him as our former city councilman, but I actually have known Dan going back to his days as Councilman Bill Peduto's Chief of Staff. Today, Dan Gilman is serving as Mayor Bill Peduto's Chief of Staff and probably sleeps, I don't know, maybe 2 hours a day right now. And I just want to welcome him. Thank you, Dan, for joining us.
Thanks, Audrey. It's great to be with you. I appreciate you putting this series on.
So I'm gonna jump in just to set the stage for some questions. So first of all, we understand that Mayor Peduto has been self-isolating in recent days due to potential exposure to the virus. How is he doing, and how are the city and staff holding up right now?
So the good news is the mayor's past his 14 days. He's out of isolation. He's feeling great, never had any symptoms or any reason for concern at all. Really did it out of an extreme overabundance of caution. He was at the National League of Cities meeting several weeks ago, and 2 people there tested positive. So he just did it to be extra careful, but thankfully he is fine and past the incubation period. City staff is holding in. You know, people look to government to not shut down. And our team has just done an absolutely amazing job, from our IT professionals who basically took an entire city government and made it work virtually in a matter of 10 days. To obviously the people on the front lines who are still out every day, whether that's police, fire, EMS, our sanitation workers, our animal control officers, and then all the people behind the scenes. It's the payroll clerks and the cashiers and the HR professionals who are keeping the city actually operating, so that for most people, they actually don't notice a difference in the city services they're receiving. And it's been incredible, and thankfully, knock on wood, so far people have remained very healthy through this.
So yes, and thank you for that, and thank you for resolving the issue with our sanitation workers as well. So as you mentioned, you know, we need these services now and even more than ever, and I can't extend my appreciation on behalf of all of us. So how are they protecting themselves and their families right now? What kinds of tools do they have, and how are you assuring that?
So the vast majority of our employees are working from home. The mayor's made a commitment, number 1, to get as many people home as possible. And number 2, we are committed, every one of our employees is getting paid no matter what, with benefits, without having to use any of their vacation time. This isn't a time where we can afford to hurt the working families of the city employees. So the vast majority are working from home. Our IT professionals, as I said, I mean, I don't know how they did it to get the city up and running so quickly virtually, whether it be city council or payroll functions. And then thank God for Zoom and Microsoft Teams that allow us to continue to go. But, you know, most of those systems are taking place. And then for those people that have to be out, we're taking all the precautions we can. Equipment, social distancing, hand washing stations, locking down other facilities. If you drive past, you know, one of the fire stations near your house, you'll see signs that say, you know, sorry, but no visitors right now, or we're not accepting food donations from incredibly kind Pittsburghers who are trying to deliver food to police stations. We're putting everything on lockdown to limit as many interactions as possible. And then we've made major changes to our standard operating procedures for 911 calls and everything else to make sure we're only sending in the absolutely necessary professionals into the room and trying to limit contacts.
Really appreciate that, because I have been tempted myself to try to extend some generosity. So thank you for reminding that. So Mayor Peduto took some decisive steps in the early days of the pandemic, including an order to end major events and large gatherings. Can you talk about why that was so important, but also share any insights on how you will evaluate the appropriate time frame to start rolling back any of these restrictions?
Yeah, I mean, our first action, of course, which was the one that got all the attention, was canceling the St. Patrick's Day parade, which, while not popular at the time, I think by the time that weekend came around, there were a few people who questioned that decision in the end. Look, it's been made clear by every professional, whether it be the WHO, the CDC, or any doctor you see in any network, the key here is flattening the curve. You are not going to stop coronavirus from coming to your city or coming from your town. It's about flattening the curve so we do not overrun our hospitals. And the projections right now in Detroit, New Orleans, New York, and California are absolutely horrendous. And so our hope is that when you look back, and it's probably going to be 4 and 6 and 8 weeks till you can do this, if we're to the point where we didn't run out of ventilators, we didn't run out of hospital beds, we didn't run out of spaces for people in our hospitals, that we flatten the curve enough to get by. Because unfortunately, we're in a position where it's about getting by. We know there's going to be tragic loss of life. We know there's going to be absolute economic turmoil and destruction. It's about flattening that curve and limiting the spike. My hope is, you know, the fact that we're almost, what's today, Friday? So tomorrow is 2 weeks on St. Patrick's Day parade. So we're basically 2 weeks into our action here. That in 2 weeks, when most people are talking about seeing the peak, or 3 weeks in that time frame, we'll have flattened the curve enough that our hospital systems will survive this.
Do you have any sense of how we're doing right now, if this is sort of midpoint since St. Patrick's Day?
Yeah, I mean, the positive side is our hospitals are in an okay place, you know, on counts, and we're preparing for them to be overrun, both in terms of getting equipment, but also setting up temporary hospitals. And we're being proactive in that with partners like the Army Corps of Engineers in the private sector. The positives I will share is that if you look at the county data that comes out every day, the hospitalization rate has remained relatively flat between 1 in 6 and 1 in 7. So even though there are more positive tests, those going to the hospital are not increasing out of proportion with those numbers. And our fatality rate has stayed relatively flat as well. So you're not seeing a spike in hospitalization, which is a really good sign thus far and important. This bad side of that is, if you look at the curve, our numbers generally reflect the curve that you have seen in China and Italy, but also in San Francisco, New York, and New Orleans. So our curve is not that bad. So the fearful side is that we're just 2 weeks behind the problem rather than we're flattening the curve. But that remains to be seen. I think, you know, this city did a good job, including the private sector and everybody else, in getting people home. The negative side is yesterday was a beautiful day, and if you went past any of our parks, there were groups of people playing pickup basketball in almost every park in Pittsburgh, which is just an incredibly dangerous thing. And so, you know, it's concerning that there's still a lot of people that don't believe in the social distancing.
No, I know. I appreciate that, and I've borne witness to that. So before we jump, we have some questions out there, but before we jump to them, and I pass it over to Jonathan to take some questions, in a really unprecedented way, small businesses have been forced to to either shut down or do some really radical things to their own business. You have recently been working to build up the economic development initiatives at the state, including hiring for the first time a chief economic development officer, Marty Lamar, in the mayor's office, and a new executive director at the URA. Can you talk about how the city is using some tools right now that are at your disposal to help small businesses?
Yeah. I feel incredibly lucky that we got that team in place before this hit. Marty and Greg and Diamante, Majestic Lane, they have just been, and the staff all the way down, Tom Link, Jennifer Wilhelm, have been absolutely incredible through this. The URA got out there early. We've already put $1.7 million that we didn't have out the door, and we're scraping together every penny we can to up that number. We've deferred loan payments from existing small business clients. We've added new clients to the payroll. We're doing 0% interest loans right now. Obviously coordinating with SBA and DCED, which I know Don will talk about more with some of the programs the governor has rolled out and trying to get that in. You talked in your intro about Huntington Bank. We have a small business task force that's working together that Huntington is on. The mayor and their CEO, Susie Shibley, have talked. She's, as much of an expert on SBA loans as there is in Pittsburgh. We're lucky to have her in Huntington here supporting that. So it's been a good public-private partnership looking at these opportunities. The problem that I see, and then I'll end it on the positive side, the problem I see, and I had a call about this morning with some leaders, is local government doesn't have a lot of money. I mean, the type of, as you can see, the $2 trillion stimulus packages come from the Fed. They may not have the money either, but that's where it comes from. Right. We can't go into debt. We can't print money. Right. We can't do those types of things. And we have to be really strategic with our dollars. But what's tempting is to try to bail everyone out. And we're going to have to make some really tough decisions that is saying no to small businesses that are going to close. Sadly, we know the economic reality is everyone is not going to come through this in the same way. Every business is not going to survive. And nobody in government wants to be the one to tell a small business, sorry, we just can't do it. But if the URA and the city become the agency that's just helping you pay rent this month, only for you to close in July or August, then we're not going to have the dollars to really strategically invest in small businesses and stimulate the economy and push Main Street come August, September, October, when it's really going to be needed. So we have some tough decisions ahead of us. That being said, and I had a call yesterday with chiefs of staff from around the country. We've all become a pretty tight-knit group. And nice. I will say Democrat, Republican, big city, small city, doesn't matter. We all agree on basically all of the same principles and the same experiences through this. And we said, as kind of urban policy junkies that got into this for different reasons than dealing with a global pandemic, there's some excitement about what it's going to be like to govern in a new era, almost a New Deal era of government, where you can really think about how do you rebuild American main streets? How do you reinvest in small business? How do you change workforce development? How do you start thinking about workforce development programs and apprenticeship programs in a whole new way? That's actually exciting. So, with the, every, closed window, another window of opportunity opens, I think there's a chance for us, and with that development team you talked about, to really transform the URA and what local government does.
Yeah, it's funny how we can come together through times like this. I do want to just let everyone know, as Dan just talked about, the URA has issued an emergency loan and has deferred all of small business loan payments for the month of April, but with the caveat of what Dan just mentioned. But also the URA is actually one of the CEDOs that can help companies apply for the $100,000 loan that were announced. So, we'll have more information about that, and we'll get you Rebecca Davidson Walker, who's the contact person's info. So thank you for that. So Jonathan, what about some of the questions that are on the chat?
This is my favorite part, Audrey, because as you know, I love seeing the interaction that's going on here with our listeners and our viewers here. I'm amazed by this question, and I love this. We haven't even really thought about this or talked about it. So what can local businesses be doing to actually help the city at this point? I mean, obviously we're all trying to do our social distancing. Businesses are trying to keep their doors closed. So obviously, so there's space between us all. but what else can business be doing now to help the city do what it has to do?
Yeah, you're seeing it already. I mean, we're getting our hand sanitizer from Wiggle Whiskey and Maggie's Rum, two great local small businesses that are pitching in and turning their operations into pure public safety. I mean, this is, I hate to say it this way, but it's true. It's a wartime effort. We're seeing some really incredible creativity with 3D printing and medical devices. We're seeing that across the country and starting to see it here as well. So for every local business who can start to think about the role they can play. I mean, we've talked to our autonomous vehicle companies about food distribution and partnering with 412 Food Rescue. We have all these drivers who know the city well and want to play a role. What role can they play in getting food distribution out? Each company can really look at their workforce, their expertise, the equipment they have, and think about the ways they can play a role at this type of a time. If GM can figure out how to make ventilators and turn a car factory into a medical device production firm, and a small whiskey distributor can make hand sanitizer, there's room in the middle for everyone. And what I'm amazed by is the creativity, and it's coming from the private sector. It's not public safety calling and saying, hey, can you help us? It's just this incredible Pittsburgh spirit coming out of community unity saying we want to help.
Amazing. We love seeing that too. And to see that spirit come through is making us know we're going to come through the other side, and it will be business as usual before we know it. That's for sure.
Okay, so there's another question in here about the relationship that Governor Cuomo is suggesting with young people and those that test positive, the first to go back once testing is established. Do you have any sense of, I mean, you're probably partnering with the people in New York City as well. And is there any intelligence on that you might want to share?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I will share that given the data yesterday, almost exactly 50% of all positive cases in Pennsylvania have been people under 50. So just as a reminder to anyone who thinks this is a disease that is only going after people over 50 or over 65, it's patently false. And we now have cases with people under 18. And those are people who have been tested. So that's not counting how many asymptomatic young people are out there. So to millennials out there, or to kids and parents who have young kids, like I do, a 2 or 4-year-old upstairs who may run down and disrupt this at any moment, we need to be careful with people of all ages. The second thing about going back to work, and actually watched a national interview this morning, the idea of whether or not you really build up the antibodies and how long those last, and whether you can get this virus twice or how quickly you can, is all to be determined. There's hope that the antibodies last at least a year, but that's not clear. So one of the big things we've seen is Hong Kong in particular, and South Korea to some extent, made huge mistakes about opening too soon and then having a second wave. So we need to make sure, we are suffering through this together, and our own challenges with home education and working from home and small business. We cannot take our foot off the brakes too quickly, though, and go back. So we've got to be smart and just recognize this is going to be, probably at home for a couple of months to a few months, and the impact for a long time after that. But thinking about kind of who goes back first, another model out there, Sweden actually has closed their high schools, but is leaving open their middle and elementary schools because they think young people are safer. So we'll study all those models and watch to see what happens. But overall, we're just going to have to hunker down and find a way as a society and as a community to get through this for a number of months here.
And it is a number of months. The conversation around people being able to get reunited or unite around Easter or Passover time.
Yep.
Myth or fact?
I would say, I'm not the public health expert. I'm not a doctor, but the idea that by Easter we're going to be out of this, I think is beyond absurd. There's just no evidence that says that's possible.
Mm-hmm. And so in addition to you being regular on Zoom and using Microsoft Teams, what are some of the innovations that have surprised you, even on your own team and across the city?
Wow, that's a really good question. I actually think one of the ones I mentioned before, the 3D printing capabilities, is just remarkable, and kind of some of the maker movement and hackathon mentality that's being turned into the 3D printer movement is really fascinating and a real opportunity for success here. And I would just say it's the entrepreneurial spirit of people. Whether it's people on my team who aren't literal entrepreneurs or it's actual entrepreneurs, in conversations with people like Kit who are, out talking to these small businesses and these tech startups. There is a creativity in this city and in this country that's unmatched in the world. And that's gives us hope, not just for getting through this, but how do you stop it from happening again? I saw one of the questions as I'm kind of looking down the corner of my eye at the chat and trying to see some of them. Yeah. Somebody had put in there about, what can businesses do in the future and what can we learn to help solve it in the future? I put that out to you all. I wish I could answer it, but it does give me hope seeing what's being done in the city and around the country, that everything from big data management to 3D printing to medical device manufacturing to the incredible biotech research done at Pitt, UPMC, and across the country, that if someone is going to figure it out, not only could it be the United States, but it can very easily be Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And so I know that you don't, in terms of having any jurisdiction over the city schools, the city public schools. Any sense of the relationship? Can you talk a little bit about the schools at all? Because I think people are concerned that some people don't have access as we move to online learning, access to the tools they need.
Absolutely. I will make a couple comments. Number one, we certainly are in regular communication and we're partners on the food program. In addition to the sites where the school district is serving food every day, the city has, I think it's 5, maybe it's 6 additional sites where we're serving grab and go meals to kids so that they can get food. Because for so many children, school lunch is the only reliable meal they have. And we just can't take that away from our most at-risk youth. And the city is proud to do that for our kids in partnership with PPS. When I go through my Facebook feed, I see a number of parents, particularly in the East End where I live, who are very frustrated by the lack of online learning that's been put in place with PPS. But you've touched on it, Audrey, and that is the incredible disparity and the number of kids who don't have laptops at home, don't have Wi-Fi connectivity. These are real challenges. And distance learning is one of the greatest accelerators of disparity in access and disparity in education we have. Not to mention, you have those parents at home who are more engaged in still helping their kids, outside of a classroom environment with education and reading to their children. And then you have kids whose parents are still working and having to go to clean an office building or go be a nurse at an ER or go serve food in a hospital cafeteria who don't have a parent there right now to read to them or to do extra math problems on the side, let alone the technology gap. So we have to really watch what this is going to do. It's going to be an entire quarter, a third of an academic year that kids are losing at a really, really critical time in their academic development, and it's a major concern for us. And I will use that as a plug to give a shout out to the Penguins and Duolingo who partnered with Circles this week to donate laptops to those most in need. That is such a critical thing that companies who have the capability can do to close that gap.
Yeah, we also have a council member, Computer Reach, that's trying to provide access to laptops and learning and everything. So really, it's just great to see that things are happening to try to make that happen. We need so much more of it.
So Dan, we're coming to the end of this, and people have questions, and we will archive those questions and get some answers to people. We also are recording this, so I can't thank you enough. But what can we do for you? We're asking you a lot, and on behalf of the tech community, what can we do for you?
I will give you the answer I would give any community, which is stay home, stay home, stay home. Take this as seriously as anything you could take in your life. This country hasn't seen something like this since 1918 with the flu epidemic. I don't think we're going to see the level of disruption since World War II that we're about to experience. And this is fatal and incredibly scary. So, just do everything you can to stay home. Let your employees stay home. Do as much as you can virtually. And just, if we get through this together, we will get through it together. But it's going to take everybody doing their part to keep this city safe. Okay, well, I can't thank you enough. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for working around the clock.
Thanks for just being you, Dan. It really means the world to all of us. Thank you for being accessible. We will keep up with you and vice versa, I'm sure. We are now going to pass the baton to Dawn Smith. So everyone stay tuned. And Dan, you're welcome to stay if you like, but I'm sure you have lots of other things to do.
Thanks,
So,
Audrey, and thanks to everyone who joined in and the comments, which I've been reading. The response from the Pittsburgh community has been exactly what we'd expect as Pittsburghers, and that's nothing short of phenomenal.
thank you, Dan. So now I'm going to take a minute to introduce, if you don't know him, Don Smith, who's a good friend to the tech community, and he's been involved in technology economic development for a long time, actually at Carnegie Mellon, leading that initiative for, I don't know how long, Don, but it was quite a while. And you probably know him now as running RIDC. RIDC is actually one of the CEDOs that are going to help provide the processing for some of this work that we've been talking about all week with the state and with loans. So you can see his backdrop right now. Backdrop is Mill 19, which is one of the pieces of that we're very proud about, that RIDC has sort of been at the helm and making possible and making it real. So thank you for using that for your backdrop. And I am going to jump in and say, welcome, Don. And I also have Colleen on the phone, who's also on the line, who actually is going to answer some of the technical questions and process questions.
Very cool.
So now, Don and Colleen, can you start by giving an overview, a broad overview of the COVID-19 Working Access Capital Program and what your role is in administering that?
Well, thanks for having us here, Audrey, and congratulations on setting up this really important business communication tool in these strange times. I'm going to start soon at the high level because that will exhaust the depth of my knowledge. And then thankfully we have Colleen here to provide actual details for folks on more specific questions. But I think, you know, the state and DCD responded quickly to try and put some additional funds out, understanding that businesses are facing unprecedented challenges. And so they've moved $40 million into this new special loan program, the CWCA, the COVID Working Capital Access Program, and have started the application process. This was just announced by Governor Wolf, I believe, Wednesday afternoon, and the guidelines have just come out and have been finalized, I believe. This is a work in progress, and so these are loans up to $100,000. They're working capital loans. They have a 3-year term, but it is a 12-year amortization. So there's a balloon payment at the end of the 3 years. And there is a deferral in the beginning of payment so that you don't have to pay during this time when everything is closed. And it's meant to be a fairly straightforward and simple application process, at least as far as these programs go. So while there's normally a very complicated underwriting process for PITA loans, this one is meant to be more straightforward. But there are a number of requirements that companies have to meet in order to be eligible. And they can apply for these loans through any of the CEDOs, the Certified Economic Development Organizations. So that's the URA, that's RIDC, that's the Southwest Pennsylvania Corporation. I think there are 5 in Allegheny County. Juan Garrett's organization, Riverside Development, and I'm blanking on the 5th one, but they are on the DCD website. And so we at RIDC are one of those CEDOs, and we're happy to help process these applications and help companies get the application for the money.
Okay, so we have lots of questions, right? Just about sort of the nooks and crannies of that. So including specific requirements around profitability, collateral, loan guarantee. Can you talk about some of the hurdles that the companies should be concerned about and should not be concerned about?
Well, sure. At the macro level, they do ask for collateral. So you need it. They will take a second or third position. So they're asking for the highest available collateral position that you have. So they're not asking to go in front of your existing debt. but you then won't be able to take any additional debt after this and put it in front of them. And they are asking for any individual or entity that owns 20% or more of the company to post personal guarantees. So that's probably the biggest single hurdle to accessing these funds, is the requirement for the personal guarantee for the funds.
Okay. So I'm going to just ask Brian Kennedy, who oversees operations and government affairs for my team, to just give a little bit of an update on what we've been doing in parallel so that people can be apprised of that. So don't go away, Dawn. I think this will be additive to the work that you're doing. So Brian.
So just really quickly, the loans that are being administered by groups like RIDC are extremely popular, and they're receiving overwhelming levels of interest and applications and a lot of questions. Dawn and I and you, Audrey, spoke yesterday about the issue of personal guarantees, collateral relative to early stage investment backed startup companies. These have been a problem for at least the last couple decades relative to SBA loans, and have really kept them out of the hands of those types of businesses. We're working with, I talked to Steve DeTore this morning from DCD. Steve is in communication with the people at PETA, trying to see what options might be available to maybe loosen or waive some of those restrictions. I do know that we plan at the end of the day to have some communication with the governor's office about it as well. Good news, really good news, is that the provisions coming through Congress right now for the SBA and the 7A programs are expected to not include personal guarantee requirements and to have much looser collateral requirements. And I think, what they're beginning with the end in mind. They're trying to keep businesses afloat while they're facing shutdown orders, regardless of what kind of business it is. So we're very optimistic that early next week, we're going to be able to bring on people like, those who are supporting our program today at Huntington Bank and the SBA again to talk about those particular programs. But to be really clear, the PETA loans are going to be helpful to a large number of our member companies, but not all. So they're really important. And I really do want to use this time to let people ask questions to Colleen and to Dawn about the existing programs that are available, and try to deal with that today. But more to come next week.
So Jonathan, you want to start grabbing a couple of the questions that are in there, because we have a bunch.
Yeah, they're just
And I'd
starting
like
to spin up.
Time wisely.
Yeah, I think everyone sees, I guess, obviously there's lots of hurdles to get through the loan process on this. Any advice on how to get through these hurdles and try to expedite this and streamline?
Well, I think that, they've made this program a first come, first served program. And so I think it's really follow the guidelines step by step as strictly as you possibly can and get a complete application in our hands or other CDO's hands as quickly as possible. And then we can get it into DCED. We expect that the demand for this program will greatly exceed the amount of resources that are available. Mm-hmm. So the sooner you get a thoroughly completed application in our hands, the faster we can get it into DCD and the more likely you are to get it in before the program runs out of money.
Makes a lot of sense. Absolutely.
Okay, we have another question here. We're filling out a PETA loan for our company, which asks the assistance will be used for, but workforce isn't an option. Does RIDC have any input for what to select? So some of these are getting in the weeds, but Colleen, you might be able to help.
Definitely.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Okay, so basically this is working capital funding. So what a company has to do is go back 6 months and gather all the costs that they have for working capital. And that is what the loan is based on.
Okay.
So, actually, one of the things is that these are not considered typical PETA loans. This is the special CWCA loan within PETA. So don't fill out a standard PETA application.
Good point.
You have to fill out this CWCA application. And because it's working capital, it's eligible for a whole bunch of uses. So in the project narrative, just put in that you're using it for payroll, and that's an eligible activity.
Yes.
Where can we actually get the application? People are wondering what's the website to go to actually get to the application as well. Very important.
So you can find it on our website, www.ridc.org. And if you look under, I think, financing programs,
Yes.
the guidelines and the application are there. Or you can go straight to the dced.gov website, and they have a page dedicated to that as well. And that's the place where you can get those packets.
Fantastic. Good stuff. Good stuff. We're going to be posting this information as well after this airs so people can get that link as well and hopefully begin their application processes.
Okay, so would you advise applying for this concurrently with SBA, EIDL, et cetera? Can they stack them?
Yes, I think they should apply for everything that they can apply for.
Okay. Okay, are there any other hints? We're getting requests to collate and provide information about every single resource, and we'll work on that over the weekend. But in the interim, you have an email box, is that correct?
Yes, anyone who has an inquiry can submit it to CWCA inquiries@ridc.org.
Okay. In summation, Dawn, do you have anything else that you want to convey to the people who are on the call? We always try to make this quick and to the point, and then we follow up with the existing questions as well as providing some resources for people.
Sure, I think people need to understand this is an evolving situation and it's a brand new program. ECD is still very much gearing up for how they're going to handle these. So while I think people need to move quickly and get us their information as quickly as possible, they also need to exercise a little bit of patience. We're still trying to get some guidance on all the details about how we need to submit all these things and answer some questions. So it is very much a program in process, and we're doing everything we can to help. But people are going to have to bear with us a little bit and bear with the state because this is brand new, just created, and the infrastructure is just being tested as we go through this. We'll try to stay in communication, but it is going to take a little bit of time for things to work their way through. We're moving fast because we know people are experiencing challenges right now.
Right.
So everybody's doing their best, and we'll try to keep them informed.
A great resource to know about.
May I
Pauline?
add, there are
Yes.
4 really important items to remember: that you have to be a for-profit business. You have to have under 100 employees. Guarantees are required for anyone or entity that owns 20% or greater of the applicant. And we will need a credit report on those individuals or that entity. And the debt service ratio has to be 1-to-1 or better. If the company does not meet these 4 criteria, they are not considered eligible.
Okay.
Good to know. Good to know.
All right. Well, first of all, I can't thank you both enough. I know that you jumped through hoops to make this possible this morning. We are doing everything we can to be helpful to you and your team, and we will follow up on all the questions that I've asked. As we wrap up, I want to tell everyone that this has been an intense week for all of us. We are working fearlessly and ferociously at the Tech Council to make sure that we're giving you access to people who are both in the trenches and working on the problems, and are working closely with our elected officials from state, local, and federal. And for next week, we are continuing this. And thank you to Huntington Bank, and of course, thanks to AT&T. And Monday, we're going to hear from Justin McElhatton, who is the CEO of Industrial Scientific, which was acquired by Fortive, but is running as a standalone business, wholly owned as industrial. And they are in the gas protection business. And I think it'd be really interesting for you to hear on how they've pivoted and how they are working across many, many countries. We also have Tuesday, the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania, Scott Brady, and we also expect 1 member of Congress to join us next week, and then a return by the SBA. Thank
Great.
you all. Give us feedback. We are working really hard, and I know that you all are working even harder. So I'm signing off from the Tech Council, and all of everything that you can find, the recordings this week are on pghtech.org, and they're archived. You can have access to that, and of course, reach out to any one of us at the Tech Council. We're here working on your behalf with you as your partner. Thank you, everyone.